and welcome to FatLipMMA.com. Our co-host is professional mixed martial arts fighter and head coach at Domain MMA, Mr. Dustin Sievers, and we are extremely proud to have the administrator of the Office of Athletics, Mr. Tim Lukanoff, joining us here on FatLip MMA. Tim, question for you. MMA in Missouri is blowing up, as you well know. There's over 100 MMA promotions statewide. How is the state of MMA with regard to regulation, in your opinion?
For regulation, last year, during the calendar year of 2009, we had 21 professional MMA events. And there has been a little over 100 amateur shows that have appeared in the state of Missouri. But I see regulation increasing in the state. It's only going to get better. The sport's becoming more popular day in and day out.
Would you? Is there anything that you would change? Is there anything you would like to change? Anything at all?
Well, certainly there is. I think professional sports is running very well. We just need more and more promoters to get involved. We certainly would like some of the larger promoters coming into our state because that just makes it more popular, gets people more excited. I think there needs to be a change in the way that the amateur mixed martial arts is sanctioned or regulated in our state.
Okay. Can you expound on that? What would you like to see? What do you like, and what are some of the things, the upsides, and maybe some of the downsides? If you
well, the upside to it is that there is an independent body at each event. So we should know the results that are coming out on those events. We should know if there's injuries. The downside is that there's 7 groups right now in the state of Missouri that are allowed to sanction amateur mixed martial arts. All those groups have different rules, different policies, procedures, different licensing. Currently, there are none of them that have mandatory testing. I've really been monitoring very close lately, and there's a large majority of them that do not suspend fighters when there's a TKO or a KO. On a professional fight, if you don't go the distance, you're getting a suspension because we don't want you going to another state 4 or 5 days later and being part of a fight and risking some secondary injury. So that's one of my real big concerns. The other problem I have with it is the matchmaking. Right now it appears as though most of the sanctioning groups are just rubber stamping any fight that comes before them.
Right.
And I understand that recently they actually have implemented a rule that if you get TKO'd, it's a mandatory 30-day suspension. Is that correct?
You know, I have been preaching that to the amateur sanctioning groups, that is really important that they do that and they report that information to a nationwide data bank that's mixedmartialarts.com. They have a database on there that all the commissions in the U.S. and Canada funnel all the results, all their suspensions to. And for the most part now, the sanctioning groups are doing that. But what I'm seeing now is you'll see on results where the sanction group will say, referee stop contest, strikes, no suspension. Well, that's a TKO in my mind.
Right.
Okay, you can call it what you want to. The fighter didn't make it the distance, and what they're doing is they're protecting that fighter a little bit by not giving a suspension and calling it the referee stop the contest. Well, that's not an official decision. It's a TKO.
So the fighter doesn't concede defeat, and the referee has to intervene and stop the fight, 30-day suspension.
Absolutely. Now, we used to have that problem in boxing when these people would take a gut shot or a belly shot. The states wouldn't regulate them. Well, they'd go the next weekend and they'd fight in a different state. Well, these people figured out, hey, I can make money taking gut shots because I'm not going to get suspended. The problem is that cheats the public because who wants to go see a guy get hit in the stomach, go down, and it's over with.
Well, I seen the Combat Sports Commission. They've implemented an actual a suspension from training for 90 days. I believe it was a fighter that sustained an injury on one of the local shows, and I seen on their database, I actually got the email alerting me that this certain fighter was actually had a 90-day suspension training. In other words, I guess he's not allowed to train.
I would love to see how they're going to enforce that.
Well, but I do, Tim. I think it's a step in the right direction on the Combat Sports Commission, on Brad Wick and their part. I think it's a step in the right direction.
It's very positive. You see that in boxing now, and you're starting to see it in MMA on the pro fights. A lot of states will give a 30-day suspension or a 45-day suspension the first 30 days. There's no contact, which means you shouldn't be in the gym training. The problem is, you said, Dustin, you can't regulate it. Just think how many mixed martial arts gyms are in the state of Missouri, and you know there's not as many boxing gyms, but we don't have the staff to do it, to go out and check it. But you know what's happening. But these fighters have to realize they've got to let their brain rest. In every fight, they're taking at least one shot to the head.
So it's safe to say that you won't be sneaking around any gyms trying to find these.
No.
If I ever get one of my fighters to spin, I'm gonna start looking out in the parking lot.
That's
Look at Tim Luganov, right?
You see a state vehicle there, you better pay attention.
Tim, shifting gears a little bit, I know you've done some work in conjunction with the UFC, the Fertitta brothers. Will we ever see the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championships, in Missouri?
You know, I think we will. I really do. I've got a very good relationship with several of the people in the organization, people that were regulators in the state of Nevada that now are full-time employees with them. And by all means, I think they will be here. Don't know the timetable yet. I know in talking with one of their employees, Mark Ratner, who's kind of my liaison that I talk with there, they've got 3 more states they need to get it legalized in. Once they get it legalized in those states, then they think it's open market. I think it's a perfect place. I think mixed martial arts, especially in the Midwest, is huge right now.
Oh, absolutely.
St. Louis, Southeast Missouri is huge for amateur mixed martial arts, as well as wrestling. But,
Absolutely.
But that's another story.
St. Louis has a great heritage of fighting, you know, boxing before the MMA.
Rich
Now
fighting tradition here in St. Louis. And I, you know this, I think the UFC, if they were to come to St. Louis, I think the support would be just overwhelming.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it would sell out in probably a matter of days, if not hours, to be honest with you, because I think the people are starved here. The Strike Force event that'll be here on May 15th, my understanding is ticket sales are well above what they were last time.
Excellent.
You know, I'm hoping, keeping my fingers crossed for 12 to 15,000 people at that event. That would be a huge success for them.
And we've got a couple of local fighters. Mike Rogers, St. Charles MMA, the Vaggie affiliate there. Matt Ricehouse, the Pepper Lounge doorman, he'll be on that fight card. Exciting fighter that came up through our ranks as an amateur, and he's now turned professional. Mike's got him as a professional, so I think he'll have a large following in the Strike Force.
Well, I think right now I don't have the TV fights yet. They haven't submitted those to me. I'm sure after Saturday night with their broadcast on CBS, they'll be funneling those to me. But I believe there's 8 local fights on the undercard, and most of them are kids from right here in just Illinois, or the greater St. Louis area. So excellent show.
Yeah,
you know, their fights won't be shown on the pay-per-view, but however, I mean, they got that on their resume. They're a Strike Force veteran. That's a huge thing for these local kids.
Hey, I wanted to talk to you about this guy. My wife, she's got to be his biggest fan. Big John McCarthy of the Ultimate Fighting fame. Let's Get It On guy.
He's the best.
He's done some seminars in the past designed to help and educate referees on proper mechanics and their duties and responsibilities inside the cage. Any word on when he may come back to our area and do some seminars?
You know, I think John will be back in the very near future. I started out with John about 2 years ago when the Association of Boxing Commission was trying to develop a training seminar for mixed martial arts, and actually went out to John's training academy and spent a couple days with him out there. Super guy.
Yes.
I mean, great guy. The only problem with John that people don't like about him, he says what's on his mind, and people don't want to hear it.
That's what you need from
and
a
that's
referee.
All there's to it. Yeah, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear when they're wrong, but he is an expert. It just kind of reminds me of a story about 1.5 years ago. He was at our association meeting, and we had one of our commissioners there who was an MMA guy. And this gentleman, who was from Georgia, decided he was going to take John on and argue with him about a certain submission hold. And John explained to him there is no way you can get out of that hold. Well, they got on the mat, and John got this commissioner in the hold. It was the funniest thing I ever seen. But this kid could not get out of the hold. And of course, he got frustrated with John, and John let him go, and he got up, and he wouldn't admit he was wrong. But John knows what's going on in mixed martial arts.
Yeah, he does.
And anyway, John was here last August in Kansas City, did a training seminar for us. Right now, we're waiting on our budget with the state. As you know, everything's kind of in an uproar. We'll know in the next couple weeks if we have money in the budget. You'll see John McCarthy here in the St. Louis area next year.
Well, I attended his seminar a couple years ago, and I learned a tremendous. I referee a lot of local amateur fights, and I learned so much from that guy. That seminar was excellent.
He's really a personable guy, too.
Well, that's the 10-second buzzer, and you're watching Fat Lip MMA, and we'll be back after this, and we hope you enjoy Tips from the Pros.
This is Fat Lip MMA's Tips from the Pros. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to go over a common wrestler's escape from the mounted position. Those good, strong hips, they're going to pop up and roll you over. And as a jiu-jitsu guy, we've got to know how to counter that position. So what we're going to use is a transition into the triangle position while that wrestler does that strong escape from the mount. Okay, so what happens a lot of times when you get in this mounted position, A lot of guys get excited, they start throwing punches. Guy on bottom knows that he's going to get hit once or twice. He's going to go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get out. They're going to post up on their elbow, drop the leg, and start trying to hook the hip. They're going to use the power in their hips and kind of try to create some torque and twist the guy over. This is really common with strong wrestlers with good hips, or just kind of powerful people in general can generate the kind of power that they need to explode out of this position. So Tony, as he pops up on his elbow right here, he drops his leg and he forces, and even if I'm trying to fight him right here, he eventually twists me down and we end up back in my guard position. This is really common. This happens a lot of times. Okay, so lay on his back. As a jiu-jitsu guy, we need to have a defense for this. Now, the biggest mistake that we always try to make is trying to fight strength on strength with him right there and force him back down. The problem is, if my opponent on bottom has already gotten his hips turned down, I'm not going to be able to out-strength him right there. Especially if he's a good wrestler. He's going to fight down, put me back in my guard, and go right back to his ground and pound. We don't want that. So I have to make a definitive movement to counter his position. So what we're going to do is the second he pops up on his elbow, he's going to drop his leg flat, he pops up on his elbow. I have to take my hand on the same side and pinch on his wrist right here, okay? I have to buy myself a couple seconds of control to set this position up. So I have to control his wrist. When I do this, I'm going to pop up on my leg as much as possible, as quickly as I can right here. I got to get room to work, okay? If I leave my hips flat, he's just going to twist me over. So I pop up on my leg as fast as I can, up on my foot. I'm going to pinch on the elbow right here. When I pinch on the elbow, with my elbow on his elbow, all I'm trying to do is just make sure his arm stays in this little hole right here that he's kind of created by going around my waist. Then I'm going to take my leg around the outside and throw it around his neck, setting up for the triangle position. Okay, so as I put pressure, I pop up, and I swing out and around, and I lock up in a triangle position right now. I'm going to control the head, lift up, get the arm, pass it, grab the head. Now I can make my correction and finish a good triangle position and get the tap. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and do it full speed. So I'm in this mounted position, I'm throwing some punches. He comes up after me and he gets a sit. I pop up, I grab, I pop up right here and sit into the mounted position right here. Come up. Let's see that one, last one, full speed again. Okay. I was trying to talk my way through it rather than just do it. Okay. I hope this has been informative. I'm John Minke, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt underneath Rodrigo Vaghi, St. Louis, Missouri. This has been Tips with the Pros for FatLipMMA.com. And remember, kids, if you do your grappling, wear a gi, because sweaty guys in spandex shorts is a little gay.
Welcome back to Fat Lip MMA. On our panel today, we have Tim Lukanoff of the Missouri Office of Athletics, and of course, Dustin Sievers, the head coach at Domain MMA. Dustin, you had a question for Tim?
Yeah, Mr. Lukanoff, I'd like to touch back on regulation, this time more specifically about amateur MMA here in the state of Missouri. You know, I've been watching, I'm very passionate about regulation. I saw the UFC from its infancy. I saw it grow from this obscure underground sport, not even a sport, it's pretty much more of a spectacle. It was called no holds barred fighting, but over the last 17 years is blossomed, has evolved to this heavily regulated, legitimate sport that we now call mixed martial arts. However, I see that at the local scene, particularly the amateur level here in Missouri, that we're still growing. We're not quite at that level yet. And for our viewers that aren't familiar with how the sport is regulated, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Lukanoff, at the professional level, the state athletic commissions oversee and regulate the professional competitions. However, at the amateur level, is delegated to private sanctioning bodies who act as a liaison for the state and is mandated by the state. And I must say from firsthand experience that the system is deeply flawed. I think there's a lot of problems with it. Mainly, I say the underlying reasoning being is that if a promoter is not happy with the sanctioning body, the private sanctioning body, because they're being a little stringent, being real vigilant and upholding the rules, they can just simply fire them, move on to another sanctioning body who's going to be lax on those rules, and basically let the promoter do what he wants. And this is often at the expense of fighter safety. And I know you personally, you've been very vocal about wanting to make some reforms. I know you went to even with the extent of trying to pass a bill in which will give the state, the Missouri Office of Athletics, even more control in regulating the sport and overseeing these private sanctioning bodies. What is the status on that bill? I understand that initially it got shot down. Is that looking at reintroduce that? What is going on?
Okay, currently what's happening is approximately 3 years ago, our office was able to pass legislation that allowed the office to regulate professional mixed martial arts. And through that process, you have to go through the legislature, you have to get a senator or representative that sponsors legislation, and then it goes through the process of hearings and then to the Senate floor, House floor, and eventually on to the governor for signature.
Now, would this eliminate the private sanctioning bodies?
Yes, it would.
Okay.
Our office, the last 3 years, has offered legislation to the governor's office, which has been approved. And the last 2 years, prior to 2010, there was actual bill written, there were hearings, came all the way to the last week of the session, and the bill's been killed. And that bill would allow, basically says that the Missouri Office of Athletics regulates amateur sanctioning, or amateur mixed martial arts, and that sanction groups would cease to exist in the state of Missouri. Now, this year in 2010, we offered the same legislation. However, it never was placed in bill form. So there's never been any hearings. It's just sitting over there at the Capitol, and there'll be no action this year. So our office definitely feels it's important. We're very concerned about what you just talked about as far as the safety aspects, being able to fire a sanction group because you don't like how strict they are, and going down the road and getting you someone else who's going to let you do what you want to. There's a lot of problems with amateur sanctioning groups right now.
Well, I applaud your efforts, because I think in this state we really need one unified regulatory body, be it the Missouri Office of Athletics or one private sanctioning body, which is given control. Because like you said, it's hard when you have one sanctioning body has one set of rules, another one goes by another rules.
Absolutely, and you make a very good point. A lot of times at the state capitol, senators, representatives, they don't necessarily want to hear from state employees. So what I do is I'd encourage your viewers, your fans, anybody who's listening to this, the best thing they could do is they should call their local representative or their senator, and they should explain, how they feel about this, and they feel that changes should be made, because the more constituents who call their local representative, the easier this legislation to be able to pass. And I get that question quite a bit from around the state, and I'm not sure how many people really try to call their representative, but I'll tell you, if you make a phone call to them, they're going to return your phone call because you're a voter, and then they will speak to you.
We even spoke about, at the professional level, they do drug screening. They test blood work, and the tested guys, they don't do that at the amateur level. That's something, they can implement at the amateur level, and that will certainly make it much more safer. So you have to consider there's a lot more amateur shows, a lot more amateur fights going on every weekend than there are professional fighters. So if anything, the amateur level should be regulated more than the professional level.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree with you, certainly, and that's been obviously one bone of contention. There's a lot of amateur promoters who don't want to do any type of blood testing. But I know it's expensive, but it's all about the safety and welfare of the fighter. I can tell you that on the first professional fight that we regulated, which was in Kansas City, Missouri, our office was sent by mistake a positive hepatitis C test from an amateur fighter who had fought at least 30 times prior to that.
Wow.
So you think how many times he'd actually been in the cage with a different fighter and have that bloodborne pathogen, and there's no way for cure, and it's easily passed. So. A few years ago, blood testing was kind of a feel-good thing. It looked good. The media liked it when you did it. The media wouldn't get on you at all. And now it's pretty serious. I mean, you see more and more of that now. I don't see all the positive tests that come in because our office requires that you send a negative test. So if you send us a positive test, you're getting denied. You're not getting a license. So I don't know how many positives are out there, but it'd be kind of interesting. And I would want to know, if I was a fighter, I would want to know that person across the cage from me was clear of any type of bloodborne pathogen like that.
Now, from like a logistical standpoint, if the state were to step in and take over the sanctioning of amateur competitions, this would be a huge undertaking. I mean, there's shows going on every weekend across the whole state. What would you say, to gain the support of the taxpayers, how could you justify that taking place?
There's no way that we could go to our legislature and ask for more money, more appropriation to pay for this. What we would have to do is hire what are called per diem inspectors that work for our office. They're paid a certain amount to work for us and go out and regulate these events, and that's what we'd have to do. Our office collects an athletic tax on an event, which is 5% of the gate. That's our base fee, and that's how we pay for our expenses, along with some license fees. But the bottom line is that in the sports that we regulate, we have to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the fighters. And unfortunately, that costs money. And the way I look at it is that if you determine the cost to hire a sanctioning group and the cost for the state to regulate, I think you'll see a cost savings over the amount of time.
Well, could it ultimately be a profitable endeavor in taking over?
Well, for the state, yes, it could be profitable, but we're bound by our statute, which allows us to only collect a certain amount of money. So if we collect too much money, what'll happen is license fees will go down. So your promoter's license, your fighter's fees, all those are going to go down. So it's a win-win. I mean, the best part about it is the state's assured that they're going to have sales taxes on the on the sale of food, liquor, and beverage. There's income taxes on the pros for these fighters who are making money. So there's indirect benefits for the state.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, we're going to take a short break. You're watching Fat Lip MMA, and we'll be back after this. Welcome back to Fat Lip MMA. Recently, we just had a show downtown St. Louis, the Gyrocycle Fight Series. It was on April 10th. The event was called Twisted Fury. We had a strong turnout. The fights were off the chain. One we can talk about, Johann Slaughter of Burgers MMA versus Kevin Bathon of Domain MMA.
Kevin Bathon's my fighter, and I tell you what, that fight was a clash of styles. I've seen Johann's fight. I've trained with Johann's before, and I know all about Kevin. Johann's is a sprinter. He's strong. He comes out of the gate hard, and he tends to slow down as he goes on. A lot of fighters are like that. Kevin's the exact opposite. He's a marathon man. He starts out a little slow, but he gradually gets stronger. So I told Kevin, look, this is our strategy is you have to weather Johann's storm, and then later in the halfway through the fight, you should be able to start taking over. I tell you what, most times strategies don't go the way you plan. This went to a T. I mean, Johann's was all over him that first round. He was throwing him around like a rag doll, but fortunately, and Johann's is a great fighter.
He is a great fighter. I'm glad you said that, because is there a more dynamic fighter in our area than Johann?
He's a machine. If Johann's can work on his conditioning and fight the whole fight the way he does the first round, look out. You got a very tough fighter.
Yeah, he is a very tough fighter.
But we were fortunate to get it was a decision. It was a close decision, but the strategy worked, and Kevin got the win. I was very proud of him.
Right. Blake Chatham versus Adam Meredith. Chatham of Burgers MMA and Adam Meredith of St. Charles MMA. Mike Rogers. You want to talk about that one?
Yeah, that was a short fight, but it was very, very entertaining as far as it went. At the beginning of the fight, Adam Meredith from St. Charles MMA lands a high kick to the head and drops him. And I asked Blake after the fight, I was like, did that land? He goes, I went out. He goes, I don't even remember. And then, of course, Adam Meredith was very impressive. He jumped on me. He's all over him, just really beating him down. And I tipped my hat to Blake Chatham because he stayed composed. He weathered that storm and eventually caught Adam Meredith shockingly in a heel hook.
Yeah.
Actually, it injured. I was worried because Adam was limping around. I thought maybe he was hurt. Maybe he tore up his knee. But I talked to his Mike Rogers, coach of St. Charles MMA. He said he's fine.
Meredith, he busted Chatham's dishes pretty good, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
I
thought Chatham was in some trouble.
I did too. But he pulled it out.
Yeah.
Pulled it out. Steve Dietrich, the super fight, the Gyrocycles super fight. Steve Dietrich versus a very tough Aaron Brown from Steve Knogel's California Mixed Martial Arts Camp.
It lived up to its billing. It was an awesome fight. It's one of those fights that almost went the whole distance without going the distance, with a stoppage at the very end. And I tell you what, the deciding factor in this was Steve Dietrich's experience. Aaron Brown's tremendous talent. He was all over Dietrich that first round, but Steve's older. I mean, I think Aaron Brown's only 19 years old, so he's amazing talent, but he doesn't have a whole lot of fights. I think that was the difference. Later in the fight, Dietrich started taking that experience, showed that age showed, and he started taking over the fight and eventually landed that submission on Aaron Brown and submitted him. I believe it was late in the fight because it was a 4-minute round fight, so it was a very long fight. So hats off to both
Aaron
kids.
Brown, a typical Steve Knogel program fighter.
Those guys are tough.
Oh man, just a concrete jaw, 100 miles an hour in your face, pressing the fight the whole time, athletic, You had everything in that fight.
Yeah, you fight a CMMA guy, win, lose,
you
or
better
draw. You better be ready for a
better
fight.
bring it. Yeah,
better
you're
be
gonna
ready
have to
for a
beat
fight.
those guys.
That's probably the most talented kid I've ever seen come out of that camp. Though he's only 19 years old.
Yeah,
his
bright future.
his future is huge. I just think it was a tough fight. He did very well, but Dietrich, and I understand Dietrich's going pro now, so we'll be seeing Steve
Yeah, I
Dietrich
think
on the
Steve
pro level.
mentioned that this will be his last fight at
I
the
think he
amateur
should.
scene. But Brown, that kid's just in his embryonic stages of his mixed martial arts career, and I think he's got a bright future as well. All right, that's the 10-second warning, and we're going to conclude with thanking Tim Lukanoff of the Missouri Office of Athletics, Dustin Sievers, our co-host of Domain MMA. We'd like to thank Gyra Cycles, a huge supporter of MMA in our area. Thanks for tuning in. This is Fat Lip MMA.